The twin suns burned high above the desert colony, spilling waves of heat across the cracked ground. Every creature, every family, every worker in this land lived in fear of thirst. Water was not just precious, it was life itself. And in this colony, water theft was considered one of the greatest crimes. Near the guarded tanks, where silver pipes carried drops of liquid gold, a small figure crept through the shadows. It was a young alien girl, no older than 16. Her clothes were torn, her skin dry and pale. She carried a clay jar close to her chest, her hands shaking as she crawled nearer. Her mother had collapsed 3 days ago. Younger brothers. Lips were so dry he could not even cry anymore. They needed water or they would die. And so, despite the fear that twisted her stomach, the girl came here. She knew the punishment. If caught, she would lose an arm. But the thought of her family gasping for air, begging for water, gave her courage. She glanced left and right. The guards were still talking, distracted, their spears resting against the ground. Her heart pounded in her ears as she slid closer. Clutching her jar, slowly, she twisted the small tap at the edge of the tank. A thin stream of water began to fall. Her jar started to fill and she held her breath, desperate not to make a sound. But droplets betrayed her. One splash echoed on the metal surface. One of the guards turned sharply, his eyes narrowed. "Thief."
Ice.
His voice roared, shattering the silence. The girl froze, her jar slipping from her trembling hands. Water spilled into the dust. 2 guards stormed forward, their heavy boots crushing the sand, their shadows falling over her small figure. She stumbled back, whispering, "Please, my family. They need, but mercy was rare here." The first guard seized her arm, twisting it painfully behind her back. She cried out as the second one drew a blade, its edge gleaming under the cruel suns. "Steal water, lose a limb," the guard growled. "The law is the law," her heart thundered. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears burning her cheeks. She had imagined this moment before coming, her arm chopped away, her body thrown aside like trash. Still, she thought of her brother's cracked lips, her mother's fading eyes. She died, at least she had tried. The blade rose higher. The crowd gathered, whispering in excitement. Some shook their heads, some laughed cruelly. To them, this was entertainment, a thief, getting what she deserved. But just as the blade was about to fall, another voice cut through the air. Strong, calm, defiant. "Stop." The guards froze, turning their heads toward the source. A man stood a few steps away. His figure was tall, his shoulders broad. Dust clung to his boots, his face, and his uniform, but his eyes burned with fire. A human, the crowd gasped. Humans were rare in this part of the desert. Most avoided the colony, calling it cursed. But this one had stayed. He was an outsider, yet he had earned respect for his strength and strange courage. Now he was stepping into danger that no sane person would. The human walked forward, his steps slow but steady. He raised a hand, pointing at the guard's blade. "You don't need to do this." The guards frowned. "This is our law. She is a thief." The human's jaw tightened. He looked at the girl, her face pale with fear, her arm trapped in the guard's iron grip. Her eyes met his for a brief moment, confusion, terror, and a spark of hope. "She's just a child," the human said firmly. "Look at her. She's starving. She's desperate. Does that deserve a blade?" The guard holding the weapon laughed. Bitterly, "You speak like a fool, human. Water is law. Water is survival. If we let one thief go, others will follow. Soon, chaos will drown us." The human did not flinch. His voice dropped lower, sharper. "If you strike her, you prove your strength against a child. But what honor is there in that?" the crowd murmured. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others grew silent. The girl's chest heaved as she stared at the stranger who dared to speak for her. The guards looked at each other, uncertain for the first time. The blade still hovered, its edge reflecting the blazing suns. The human stepped closer, his hand now resting calmly on the guard's arm. "Let her go," he whispered, his voice carrying weight that seemed heavier than the desert itself. The silence deepened. The crowd waited. The girl's breath caught. Would they listen? Or would the human's defiance bring blood upon them both? The blade trembled in the guard's grip. Dust swirled in the hot air. The girl's fate now balanced on the edge of steel. And the courage of one human stranger? Asterisk, the blade still hung in the air, ready to cut through flesh. The girl's breath came fast, her body trembling as though the sun itself wanted to swallow her whole. Around her, the crowd leaned closer, whispering about what would happen next. The human, dusty and tired-looking yet firm, stood between her and the guards. His eyes didn't waver, though the tension in the air was sharp enough to slice through. "Stone, let her go," he repeated, his voice steady like a hammer striking iron. The guard with the blade narrowed his eyes. His lips curled into a mocking smile. "You dare command us, outsider? This is not your world. This is not your law." The human tilted his head slightly, almost as if considering the weight of those words. His voice, calm yet cutting, answered, "Laws exist to protect the weak, not destroy them. If you kill her for a handful of water, then your law is nothing but cruelty." Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had ever spoken against the water law. To question it was to invite punishment worse than death. The second guard shoved the girl harder, forcing her to the ground. She cried out as dust filled her mouth and eyes. He sneered at the human. "Stay back, human. You've already spoken too much. Walk away before we decide you're a thief too." But the human didn't move. He didn't even blink. His silence was louder than the crowd's whispers, louder than the hot wind carrying dust through the market. Finally, he stepped closer, his boots crunching against the stone floor. "You think you scare me?" he asked softly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "I've seen storms that swallowed cities. I've walked battlefields where rivers of blood ran deeper than any water tank you guard. And still you expect me to fear your blade?" The crowd stiffened. His words didn't sound like boasts. They sounded like truths carved into his very skin. A moment, even the guards hesitated. The girl, still on the ground, lifted her face. Through her tear-streaked eyes, she studied the man. His jaw was hard, his eyes sharp as steel, yet there was something burning behind them, something more than pride. She didn't know why, but for the first time since her father's death, she felt a flicker of safety. The guard with the blade growled, trying to shake off his unease. "Then prove it, human. Fight us, if you want to save her." He raised the blade higher, his muscles tightening, daring the outsider to make a move. Human did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he spread his arms slightly, showing empty hands. His voice rang out for all to hear, double quotes, "No, I won't fight you, not because I can't, but because fighting you will change nothing. Kill me, kill her. What lesson do your children learn? That thirst makes men monsters, or that mercy is weakness?" The words struck harder than fists. The crowd murmured louder now, restless. Mothers pulled their children closer. Some of the men frowned, uneasy. For the first time, they saw their laws reflected in the mirror of the human's voice, and what they saw was ugliness. The chief guard, frustrated, shoved the girl forward, forcing her arm on a stone slab. He shouted, "Enough of this. She will pay for her crime, and this outsider will learn his place." The blade gleamed under the suns, inches from falling. Then the human did something no one expected. He stepped forward, placed his own arm flat on the slab, and said, "If an arm must be taken, then take mine. She stole water because she is weak. I give mine because I am strong. Which one of us do you fear more?" The silence that followed was suffocating. The crowd gasped, some even covering their mouths. The guards froze, their eyes widening. The girl stared in shock, unable to breathe. What kind of madness was this? Why would a stranger offer his own flesh for hers? The guard's blade trembled. His pride pushed him to strike, but his heart faltered. To wound a child was simple. To maim a human who offered himself with such courage that was something else entirely. The crowd grew louder, voices clashing. Some demanded blood, others shouted for mercy. The councilmen watching from the balcony whispered among themselves. Uncertain for the first time in years, the human stood tall, his arms still resting on the slab, eyes locked on the guard. His voice was calm but sharp as steel. Well, what will it be? A child's arm or mine? The girl's heart raced. She wanted to scream at him to stop, to run, to save himself. But her throat burned, no words leaving her dry lips. The guard's hand shook, sweat dripping down his brow. He looked at his partner. He looked at the human's steady eyes. And for the first time, he felt shame. The blade did not fall. Instead, the guard slammed it back into its sheath with a frustrated growl. Fine, the child lives. But remember, this human you have made enemies today. Next time, no words will save you. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some cursing. The guard stepped back, shoving the girl away. She collapsed against the ground, shaking, her jaw shattered. Her arm bruised, but still hers. The human bent down and gently helped her up. His grip was firm but kind, guiding her away from the slab. Their eyes met briefly. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words, came only silent tears. The crowd's voices followed them as they walked away. Some called him a fool, others whispered about his bravery. But one thing was certain, nothing would be the same after today. The girl clutched her arm, still trembling. The human looked straight ahead, his jaw tight. He had stepped into a storm. And he knew it was only the beginning. The market square still hummed with whispers after the human's bold stand. Some called him brave, others called him foolish, but no one dared to deny that his actions had shaken the colony's silence. The alien girl, arms still bruised, walked beside him. She could barely keep up with his steady steps. Every few moments she looked at him as if expecting him to vanish like a mirage. When they reached the edge of the square, the guards shouted again, "Wait! This is not finished." The human stopped. Slowly he turned back. The chief guard stood. With his partner both glaring, the law demanded punishment. The council demanded order. Letting a thief walk free without cost would invite rebellion. The crowd leaned forward, eager for what came next. The chief guard's voice thundered, "She may live, but her crime cannot be ignored. If her arm is spared, then yours must pay." Another way? Do you offer her life as charity, human, or as trade? The human's jaw clenched. He knew what was coming. These men would not allow mercy without a price. He glanced at the girl. She stood trembling, her wide eyes begging him to leave her behind. She whispered, barely audible, "Don't. Don't do this for me." But the human shook his head slowly. He turned back to the guards and spoke clearly, so all could hear. "Take my rations. Every drop of water I own belongs to her family. I will survive with what little is left. That is my bargain." A gasp spread through the crowd. To give away water rations was madness. In this desert colony, water was life. No soldier, no worker, no merchant could survive without it. To hand them away was the same as signing one's death sentence. The guards looked at each other, surprised. Even they had not expected such an offer. One of them sneered. "And when you collapse from thirst, human? What then? Who saves you?" The human didn't flinch. "That's my problem, not hers." The chief guard rubbed his chin. The human's. Defiance was dangerous, but it could also serve as a lesson. To show the colony that even outsiders must bow before the law. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, the girl will walk free. But from this day forward, your rations belong to her family. You will work double shifts under the suns to pay the price. Fail even once, and both of you will suffer." The decision struck the air like a hammer. The crowd broke into shouts, some cheering the girl's survival, others laughing at the human's foolishness. A few whispered in awe, wondering if perhaps this was not weakness, but strength of a kind they had forgotten. The girl's knees nearly gave way. She clutched her arm, her chest heaving. Why? Why would a stranger choose death's shadow for her sake? As the guards left, satisfied with their bargain, the human bent down slightly and met her gaze. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You're safe now. Go to your family." Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to ask, "Why me? Why would you risk everything for a thief?" But the words died on her tongue. Instead, tears slipped down her cheeks, and she bowed her head. The human turned and began walking toward the labor fields. Already the overseers were calling his name, demanding he start his punishment shifts. The girl stood there clutching her. Jars, broken pieces. For the first time in her life, she felt a weight she could not understand. Not guilt alone, but something heavier. That night, as the suns dipped and the stars returned, she carried her rations home. Her mother wept, her brother drank deeply, his small voice returning with life, yet her heart did not rest. Every sip of water tasted like the human sacrifice. In the fields, the human worked under the blazing suns.
Oh.
Sweat poured down his back. His lips cracked with dryness, but he never once slowed. Every shovel of sand, every lift of stone was a choice. His choice the colony watched from a distance. Some mocked him, calling him the thirst fool. Others admired him quietly, their hearts stirred by something they had forgotten long ago. Honor. The girl lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her small home. She whispered to herself, "Why? Why would a human do this? What does he want?" But she already knew the answer, though it frightened her. He wanted nothing, and that was what made it dangerous. For in a land where every drop of kindness was sold for a price, true mercy was more powerful than any blade, and the human had just planted a seed of rebellion in every heart that hurt his. Bargain. The suns rose heavy the next morning, their burning light spilling across the colony. The desert shimmered, as though fire itself crawled over the land. Workers moved slowly, weighed down by the heat, their faces already pale from thirst. Among them was the human. His punishment had begun. He was sent to the stone pits, where heavy blocks were pulled from the ground and hauled across endless tracts of sand. Each worker carried one block at a time. But for him, the overseers ordered two. His sweat darkened the ground, his lips cracked, but his back did not bend. With every stone he lifted, whispers followed, some mocking, others filled with quiet. "Wonder. He'll die in a week," one worker muttered. "No, look at him. He doesn't stop," another replied. The girl returned that morning, clutching the clay jar he had given her. Her family was alive because of him. But her heart was not light, it was heavy, heavier than the stones he carried. She stood at the edge of the pits, watching him under the merciless sun. His shirt clung to his body, his hands blistered, yet his eyes remained sharp. She wanted to run to him. She wanted to shout, "Stop, you'll die for me." But her legs would not move. Her throat felt locked, her words buried beneath fear and shame. By midday, the overseers brought more guards. The human was ordered to repair broken water pipes, along with his hauling duty. The pipes were old, buried beneath scorching sand. Each one had to be dug out and sealed again. The work was endless, back-breaking, designed to crush spirit and strength. But he did not falter, even when his knees trembled, even when blood seeped from his palms. He worked as if the desert itself dared him to give up. At the edge of the pits, the girl whispered to herself, "Why don't you stop?" One of the guards sneered at her, "'Cause he is proud. Humans are strange. They would rather break themselves than bow." But the girl shook her head softly. No, it wasn't pride. It was something else, something she had never seen before in her people. Strength not of muscle, but of spirit. By evening, the last rays of sun dipped behind the dunes. The human finally collapsed to one knee. The crowd gasped, some laughing cruelly. "Look, the thirst fool falls at last." But he rose again, his jaw tight, his body trembling yet refusing to surrender. He carried one last stone across the sand before the overseers finally called an end. That night, the colony gathered for council. The leaders debated whether the bargain had been fair. Some argued the human's rations were wasted on an alien thief. Others claimed his strength was dangerous, that mercy could inspire rebellion among the poor. The girl listened from outside the hall, her stomach twisted with guilt. It was her theft that had dragged him into this, her weakness that made him suffer. And yet when he emerged from the hall later that night, his steps were steady. His eyes found hers in the shadows. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he handed her a small flask of water, his last portion for the day. She shook her head violently. "No, you'll die." He placed the flask gently in her hands, his voice calm. "You need it more." Her eyes burned with tears. She clutched the flask tightly, whispering, "Why? Why do you do this for me?" The human paused. His face covered in dust and sweat softened. "Because no one else would." The words struck her harder than any blade. No one else would. Not her neighbors. Not her leaders. It's only this human, an outsider with nothing to gain. She wanted to speak, but her throat closed. She bowed her head, ashamed, and fled back to her home, clutching the flask against her chest. That night, lying awake, she thought of his words again and again. Mercy had saved her life, but it carried a price, and that price was being carved into his flesh every hour under the suns. She realized then, his punishment was not his alone. It was hers too. Every drop of water she drank carried his pain. Every breath her brother took was borrowed from his sacrifice. The colony had wanted to make an example of him, to show that mercy was weakness. But slowly, quietly, a different lesson was spreading. Some workers spoke of his endurance. Mothers told their children of his defiance. And in the silence of the night, even the guards wondered what gave him such strength. The girl closed her eyes, her fists tight. For the first time in her life, she felt a fire burn in her heart, not of shame, but of resolve. If the human was willing to pay the price of mercy, then she would not let his sacrifice be in vain. The desert never forgave weakness. It was not the guards nor the council, but the sands themselves that decided who lived and who died. And one night the desert struck back. At first, it came as a whisper, a low howl carried across the dunes, a breath of wind colder than the usual heat. Children stirred in their sleep, animals growled uneasily. Then the whisper grew. The sky turned a strange color, glowing with a dull red as though fire spread behind the stars. By dawn, the storm had arrived. A sandstorm, unlike any seen in years, rolled toward the colony like a wall of death. Towers of dust rose higher than the watchtowers. The air roared as if the desert itself was screaming. Panic erupted. Families rushed to seal their doors, traders grabbed what goods they could carry, and guards shouted orders that no one could. Here above the howling winds, the girl woke to her brother's cries. Her small home shook, sand forcing its way through cracks in the walls. Her mother, weak and coughing, could barely move. Fear clawed at the girl's heart. She remembered the story storms that buried entire villages, storms that swallowed people whole. Then she thought of him. Human was. Was he out there in the pits, fighting against this storm, just as he had fought against the guards? She wanted to run and find him, but her brother's small hands clung to her arm. She could not leave them. Outside, chaos reigned. Water pipes tore loose, spraying precious liquid into the air before vanishing in the storm. Roofs ripped away, flying into the sky like broken wings. The colony cried out for help, but no help came. Except one. Through the storm, the human's figure moved like a shadow of stone. His body bent against the winds, his arms wrapped in cloth, his eyes narrowed against flying sand. Where others fled, he pushed forward, carried ropes, tools, anything he could salvage. When pipes burst, he fought to seal them. When walls cracked, he used his own body to brace them. People stared in shock. Why doesn't he run? Why doesn't he hide? Because he could not. Mercy had a price, and he had already chosen to pay. It dawed. The girl saw him through a crack in the door. Her breath caught. He looked half dead, sand cutting his skin, blood mixing with dust. Yet his movements were steady, relentless, as if the storm itself could not bend him. When a section of the water tank tower collapsed, crushing a worker beneath, it was the human who lifted the beam, dragging the man free. When children were trapped under a shattered roof, it was his hands that tore the wood apart. His strength, already drained from days of punishment, burned anew in the face of disaster. The storm raged for hours. The colony felt as though the desert itself wanted to erase it from existence. By dusk, silence finally returned. The winds died, leaving the colony buried in layers of dust and ruin. Half the pipes were broken. Houses lay in pieces. Families mourned their dead. And in the center of it all stood the human covered in blood. Sand and exhaustion, yet still on his feet. His chest rose and fell heavily, his eyes scanning the damage. He had given everything, yet still he stood. Girl pushed past the door and ran to him, tears streaming down her face. She stumbled to his side, her hands trembling as she touched his arm. You saved them. You saved all of us." He looked at her, his face pale, his lips cracked. For a moment, he seemed about to collapse. But instead, he gave a faint smile and whispered, "No. I only did what had to be done." Behind them, the crowd gathered. For the first time, the whispers were not of mockery. Men and women stared at him with awe. The same people who had once laughed at the thirst fool now saw something else, something stronger than law, stronger than the desert. But not everyone was pleased. From the shadows of the council hall, the leaders watched. Their eyes were dark, their faces twisted. The storm had not only broken pipes and homes, it had broken their control. The people had seen with their own eyes that mercy and courage could save more lives than cruelty and fear, and that made the human dangerous. The girl felt the shift in the air. She saw the envy, the anger, hiding in the council's gaze. Chill ran through her spine. She realized that though the storm had passed, a greater one was now building. As night fell, the colony buried their dead and counted their losses. Families wept, but also whispered the human's name with gratitude. Children stared at him with wide eyes, as if he were some ancient hero come alive. The girl stayed near him, silent but determined. She knew now, sacrifice was not just for her, it was for everyone. He had carried the price of mercy on his back, and in doing so, had planted hope in the hearts of an entire colony. But hope was dangerous in a place ruled by fear, and somewhere deep inside, she knew the storm outside had ended. But the storm inside the colony had only just begun. The colony had survived the storm, but its scars were everywhere. Pipes lay broken, roofs were torn, and the sand carried the smell of loss. Yet, amid the ruin, whispers of hope spread whispers, tied to one name, the human. Mothers told their children how he pulled them from falling beams. Workers remembered his hands sealing the pipes while the storm tore at his skin. Even the poorest families, who had nothing to give, spoke of him with respect, but the council sat in silence, their faces carved in stone. They did not see a hero. They saw a threat. By law, they were the protectors of the colony, the guardians of order. Yet when the storm struck, they had hidden behind sealed doors. And the people had noticed. Their authority was slipping, and the humans' defiance had turned into a mirror, showing everyone their cowardice. So the council acted. 2 nights after the storm, they summoned the human to the square. Torches lit the cracked stone walls, casting long shadows. The people gathered, curious and fearful, the alien girl among them. Her heart raced. She could feel something dangerous in the air. The chief counselor stepped forward, his robe heavy with dust. His voice boomed across the square. "You stand accused of breaking the law of water. You interfered with justice, and now your actions spread chaos. You pretend to be a savior, but you weaken the very order that keeps us alive." The crowd stirred. Uneasily, many disagreed, but fear kept their voices low. The human stood tall, his arms crossed, his eyes unflinching. He did not bow, nor did he tremble. His silence itself felt like defiance. The counselor slammed his staff against the ground. "Do you deny it? Do you deny that your mercy has encouraged disobedience?" Finally, the human spoke. His voice was calm, but every word struck like stone. "I do not deny mercy. I do not deny saving lives. If that is disobedience, then yes, I am guilty." Yes. The crowd gasped. No one had ever spoken so openly against the council. The counselor's face darkened. "Then you admit you are a danger to us all." The human's voice rose, sharper now. No, I am not the danger. Thirst is the danger. Greed is the danger. You hoard water while children die with cracked lips. You punish the weak instead of protecting them. That is the true crime. The square went silent. Every heart pounded. Mothers looked at their children, workers at their empty hands. The truth, long buried under fear, now echoed in the open air. The alien girl's chest tightened. She felt her eyes sting with tears. His words carried the pain of her own life, the suffering of her family, the cruelty she had endured. He spoke not only for her but for all of them. The guards stiffened, their hands tightening on their weapons. The counselor raised his staff again. Silence him. But before the guards could move, voices rose from the crowd. He speaks the truth, shouted an old worker. My son would be dead without him, cried a mother. Why should we suffer? While the council drinks freely, another voice called. The square shook with noise. For the first time in years, the people were not silent. The human lifted his hand, and the voices quieted, waiting for his words. He looked at them all faces. Tired, eyes hollow, yet sparks of hope burning within. You do not need to live as slaves to thirst, he said firmly. You do not need to fear mercy. Water is life, and life belongs to all. If your leaders will not give it, then you must stand together and demand it. The crowd roared, louder than the storm that had nearly destroyed them. The counselors. Faces paled. Their control was slipping through their fingers like sand. The guards moved, surrounding the human, their blades drawn. The alien girl's breath caught. Her legs shook, but she pushed through the crowd, crying out, Stop! He saved us.
Ow.
Without him, we would all be dead. The guards hesitated, eyes flicking between the girl and the human. More voices rose, shouting in support. The people pressed forward, their numbers growing. The counselor's staff shook in his hand. His voice cracked with anger. This human is poison. If you follow him, you doom yourselves. But his words fell empty. For the people had seen courage. They had seen strength, not in cruelty, but in sacrifice. No law could erase that. The human stood tall, his eyes blazing like the desert suns. He had no weapon, no army, yet the crowd behind him was larger than any force the council could summon. The girl looked at him, her heart trembling. She understood now. This fight had never been just for her. It was for everyone who had ever been. Crushed by injustice, the night ended not with blood, but with a promise. The people did not yet rise in rebellion, but the seed had been planted. The human had stood against injustice for the first time. The colony had stood with him. The colony was never the same after that night. Whispers spread faster than the desert winds. Some called the human reckless. Others called him dangerous. But most began to see him as something far greater, a shield, a voice, a hope in the wasteland. And for the council, that was the most dangerous thing of all. They tried to silence the whispers. They ordered guards to threaten the workers, to remind them that law was stronger than mercy. But the people had already seen too much. They had seen who had stood with them in the storm, and who had hidden behind locked doors everywhere the human walked. Eyes followed him, not with scorn, but with respect. He carried no weapon, no title, no power. Yet he carried something stronger. Loyalty of those who had nothing left to lose. The alien girl stayed near him whenever she could. Her heart no longer trembled with fear, but with a strange mixture of gratitude and duty. She had stolen water once, desperate to keep her family alive. Now she felt as though her life itself belonged to him. One evening, as the suns bled red into the horizon, she found him working by the broken water tower. His hands were wrapped in cloth, his face weary, yet he did not stop. He tied ropes, patched leaks, and checked pipes, as though the colony's survival rested entirely on his shoulders. She stood there for a long time, clutching the small flask he had given her days ago. Then she finally spoke, her voice soft. You should not carry this alone. He looked up, sweat dripping from his brow. For a moment, he said nothing. Then a faint smile touched his lips. I don't carry it alone. You're here, aren't you? Her throat tightened. She stepped closer, kneeling beside him, helping hold the ropes as he worked. Her small hands trembled, but she didn't let go. That night, After the repairs, the people gathered again. Not by command, not by force, but by choice. Families brought what little they had: bowls, jars, broken cups. The workers who had once mocked the human now stood with him. Together, they poured the saved drops of water into a single large vessel. The human stepped forward, his voice steady as he looked at them all. "This is not mine," he said, gesturing to the water. "It is not yours. It belongs to all of us. Share it. Protect it. Let no one go thirsty again," the crowd murmured. And slowly, one by one, the families began to take only what they needed. Children drank first, then the sick, then the elders. No guard ordered them. No council demanded it. It was the people's choice, guided by the example of one outsider. The alien girl watched, her heart swelling. This was more than survival. This was change, but the council would not remain silent. The chief counselor arrived with armed guards, fury in his eyes. "This is rebellion," he shouted. "You dare break the law. You dare defy the council." The crowd stiffened, fear rushing back into their hearts. The guards raised their weapons, ready to strike. Then the human stepped forward, placing himself between the people and the council. His shadow stretched long in the torchlight. His voice rang out like thunder. "You call it rebellion. I call it life. The law that kills children is no law at all. The law that punishes mercy is no law at all. If you want to stop us, then strike me down now. But you will not stop them." The silence that followed was heavy, trembling. The guards looked at each other, their blades shook. They'd seen him in the storm. They'd seen him in the pits. And now they saw the people standing behind him, their eyes no longer hollow with fear. No one moved. The counselor's face twisted with rage. But even he felt it, the power slipping from his hands like sand through fingers. At last, with a furious wave, he turned away. "This is not over," he spat, and disappeared into the shadows. The crowd erupted with cheers, voices rising into the night sky. For the first time, the colony had chosen itself over fear. The alien girl rushed to the humans, sighed, her eyes wet with tears. She grabbed his hand, pressing it against her chest. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I owe you everything. My life, my family, my people, they all breathe because of you. Tell me, what can I give you in return?" The human looked at her, his face softened by the firelight. He shook his head slowly. "I never asked for anything. I only wanted to do what was right." But she would not let go. She fell to her knees, lowering her head before him. "Then let me stay by your side. Let me carry this burden with you. I am not afraid anymore. Not while you are here." The crowd grew quiet, watching the moment. The human bent down, gently lifting her back to her feet. His eyes, tired yet burning with resolve, met hers. "Then stand, not behind me, beside me." And she did. That night under the stars, a bond was forged, not of law, not of fear, but of mercy and defiance. One human's choice had given birth to something the desert had never known. Hope the people would remember, the council would fear, and the girl would never again bow to thirst or cruelty because she had found her strength. Standing beside the human who had dared to change everything,